George from New York wants to talk to Don.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
George is talking to Don. I'm out of here.
George is calling to correct me. I just know it.
Yeah.
Or he's got some
I'm
very
gonna set my
interesting
mic
little
down.
tidbit. Oh,
George, you have Don.
George, are you there? Calling. He's calling George. Okay. What do you got for us?
Well, I was just thinking when you were talking about the greatest hits and or misses in Genesis, it's worth remembering the figure of Marcion. People can go look him up. That's Marcion. He was an important figure in early church history because he looked at what he had available to him in terms of the Gospels and what he had known culturally about the Old Testament, and he decided that these were two separate gods. That the God, the Father that Jesus prayed to and spoke of and would some would argue equated himself with, was an entirely different being than the Jehovah of the Old Testament. And
How
so
interesting.
he dispensed with it entirely and launched one of the great early heretical movements against what would eventually gel into Orthodox Christianity.
Right.
So
he had a version of the scripture, right, that he was trying to advance.
I think he had one or two Gospels and a handful of letters, and he jettisoned the entire Hebrew scripture. He just said, this is a different religion. This is not us.
That's interesting.
And he ordained, he was a very intelligent, educated man. He had a huge following. He ordained bishops and founded churches. And one of the earliest knockdown fights in recorded church history, I mean, all his stuff was burned and destroyed, and he was anathematized, and the other side obviously won. But the reason we know so much about him is that the people opposing him, in order to refute him and shout him down, recorded his beliefs in considerable detail. And we have the records of these denunciations, similar to Eusebius and the Contra the Heresies, where we know what these other early deviants thought because we have the denouncements and the shout downs recorded on the victor's side.
Very interesting. Yeah,
So
I've heard bits and pieces about.
This is not a new problem. This is old stuff.
And it makes some amount of sense because the Christianity is got such a different flavor and it's such a bag on the side of Judaism. The New Testament there is just such a different animal.
It is. It's such an abrupt tonal shift, and basically in the Old Testament, God behaves like Zeus or Marduk or some other pagan god. It's not very cosmic at all. He gets into wrestling matches. He has all these emotional attributes. He floods
kind
the
of a
world
spoiled.
and says, "Oops."
Yeah.
It's not terribly transcendent.
Yeah.
Also, last week, Matt was touching on the issue, as is often touched, about atheists versus, is our problem with extremism, or is it with the teachings of the religions and their scriptures and whatnot? My 2 cents on this, and we've raised this before, is, I might have said this to Matt once. A friend of mine said to me, I think your problem is not so much with me being a Christian, but with some of us who are far out Christians. He said these words. He said, I'm not throwing people onto a fire after all.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that's true, and I'm glad to hear it. But you and your kind are keeping the fire burning, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're not violently antisocial, and I appreciate that as a member of a minority belief system. I certainly do. But you're not either going to walk away from it. And I have the feeling that if you had the opportunity to reassert your cultural privileges, you would do so, and you would silence me. I think in your heart of hearts, you really don't want me standing next to you as an equal in the public square, as an outspoken atheist, telling people that I think this is all nonsense.
Because they would have to think, if they're sincere, they would have to think that the very idea that they are wrong is not something that should be publicly spoken, because it may convince people and lead them to their damnation.
Right. I mean, you honestly, if you believe, like you've often said, Matt, if you people truly believe what you're saying and what's in your scriptures, you cannot be okay with me being an atheist. You cannot accept that with equanimity. It's one or the other. Either you don't really mean what you're saying, or there's something you're not telling me.
I agree, and you can find lots of situations like that where the line they're taking doesn't make sense, right? Because it's at odds with a particular scripture, or it's at odds with a claimed belief. I see this a lot where the behavior of believers is completely at odds with what they claim to believe, right? And so the behavior tells you what the true beliefs are, right? Because you're going to act based in your own self-interest, and you're going to act based on your own beliefs, whatever they may be, and those are often very different than what they go to church and claim their beliefs are.
Well, as has often been said on TAE, most Christians really have no idea what's in their own scriptures, and certainly don't know much about the history of how this came about. And in a sense, it doesn't matter, because they've cobbled together their own sort of contemporary Christianity, which was, whether or not they admit it, has been greatly influenced by American culture and influences from Europe and other things, and from England. And, as much as they like to say that they're this, that they oppose the modern secular world, they really don't. For better or worse.
I think it would also be fair, and I know that some people are going to find this particularly insulting, because the people who probably find this insulting are the exceptions. But I think if you polled most Christians, for example, most people who claim to be Christians, at least in the United States, most of them don't really have any idea what it is that they actually believe. They have this kind of nebulous hodgepodge cobbled together bits and pieces. Don't let him get up there. And they're not, I don't think they completely know. And that's how, when you do these polls, you get these answers that seem to be conflicting.
Oh, these polls are frustrating, because it's like the questioners don't even have a clue of what they're asking, or the nuances.
Throw him back.
And they're asking these stupid, vague questions.
Come here. This is Max. I brought Max out, George. He's being pretty good.
Oh, Max the bird.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's pretty beautiful.
And he's been quiet and fairly well behaved, so he gets to stay out for a little bit. But
well, it's a good refutation, because unlike apologist arguments, Max can actually fly.
Yes. But he's just as good at parroting what other people say.
There we go.
Buddy.
Okay. Bad joke.
And I've actually stopped playing Bible bingo with people, where you pick up the thing and you say, well, did you know it says this? And they go, oh, goodness. Did you know it says that? Or you bring up the slavery, because it's almost too easy unless you have that rare person who's actually, conversant with it.
Yeah.